The first time Caleb mocked me, his words cut deeper than I'd ever let him know. "You're gonna paint your side of the room pink next, huh, Eli?" he'd said, leaning against our dorm's flimsy desk, his smirk sharp as a blade. I laughed it off, but inside, my heart twisted, a quiet ache blooming where confidence used to live. It was September in Portland, Oregon, and Reed College's campus buzzed with the chaotic energy of freshman year. I'd arrived with a suitcase full of dreams and a secret I wasn't sure I'd ever share. My name's Eli Navarro, an art major with a knack for sketching emotions I couldn't voice. I grew up in a small Arizona town where being openly gay wasn't just frowned upon. It was a risk. So, I'd learned to keep my head down, my heart guarded, and my truth buried. Reed was supposed to be my fresh start, a place where I could finally be me. But then I met Caleb Turner, my straight-as-an-arrow roommate, whose easy charm and careless jabs threatened to unravel everything. Caleb was the kind of guy who owned every room he walked into. Tall, with tousled blonde hair and a quarterback's build, he was the golden boy from Boise, Idaho, who'd probably never questioned his place in the world. He was studying political science, always talking about changing the system, yet his casual mockery of my vibes stung more than he'd ever know. That first week, he'd seen my rainbow pin on my backpack and tossed out a quip. "What's that, your Pride Parade starter kit?" The room laughed. Our suite mates, a couple of guys from Seattle, thought it was hilarious, but I felt the walls of our tiny dorm close in. I didn't correct him. I didn't tell him I was gay, not then. Instead, I smiled, shrugged, and turned back to my sketchbook where I could pour out the hurt in charcoal lines. But every jab, every offhand comment, built a quiet fire in me. I wasn't just some stereotype for him to poke at. I was Eli, with stories and scars he'd never bothered to ask about. And I was determined to prove it, even if it meant keeping my truth hidden a little longer. Our dorm was a chaotic blend of mismatched furniture and clashing personalities. Caleb's side was a shrine to sports, posters of NFL stars, a football signed by his high school team, and a gym bag that smelled like sweat and ambition. Mine was a riot of color, sketches pinned to the wall, a small easel by the window, and a stack of art books I'd saved up for years to buy. We were opposites in every way, and yet, something about Caleb's presence pulled at me. Maybe it was the way his laugh filled the room, warm and unfiltered, or how his eyes lingered on me sometimes, curious, before he'd catch himself and look away. One evening, about 3 weeks into the semester, things shifted. We were alone in the dorm, the hum of campus life muffled outside. Caleb was sprawled on his bed, scrolling through his phone, when he tossed out another barb. "Yo, Eli, you going to that art thing tonight? Gonna wear your sparkly scarf, or what?" His tone was playful, but it landed like a punch. I was heading to a student art showcase, my first chance to show my work publicly, and the scarf, a gift from my mom, vibrant with reds and blues, was my armor. I set down my pencil, my sketch half finished. "It's just a scarf, Caleb," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "You don't have to make it a thing." He sat up, surprised, his grin faltering. "Whoa, chill, man. I'm just messing with you." "Yeah, well, maybe I'm tired of being your punchline." The words slipped out before I could stop them, raw and unfiltered. For a moment, the room was silent, the air thick with something unspoken. Caleb's brows furrowed, like he was seeing me for the first time. "Dude, I didn't mean," he started, but I grabbed my scarf and my portfolio and walked out, my heart pounding. I didn't need his approval, I told myself. I didn't need him to understand. But as I stepped into the cool night air, the showcase lights glowing in the distance, I couldn't shake the feeling that Caleb's words were only the beginning of something bigger, something that would change us both. The art showcase was held in the college's old library, a cavernous space with stained glass windows and the scent of aged books. My piece, a charcoal sketch of 2 hands reaching for each other against a fractured background, was displayed near the center. It was personal, too personal maybe, a reflection of the push and pull I felt between hiding and being seen. As I mingled with other students, their praise washing over me, I felt a flicker of pride. This was my world, my truth, even if Caleb couldn't see it. But then I saw him. Caleb, standing awkwardly by the refreshment table, his football jacket out of place among the artsy crowd. He caught my eye and gave a hesitant wave. My stomach twisted. What was he doing here? Had he come to mock me again, or was there something else in that guarded look he wore? I crossed the room, my scarf trailing behind me. What are you doing here? I asked, my voice low but firm. He shrugged, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Heard you had a piece up. Thought I'd check it out. His eyes flicked to my sketch, and for a moment, he was quiet, studying it. It's intense, he said finally, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. What's it about? I hesitated. This was it. The moment to decide how much of myself to share. It's about wanting to be seen, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Really seen. Caleb's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw something shift in him. Curiosity, maybe, or the faintest crack in his armor. But before he could respond, a voice called my name from across the room. It was Professor Lin, my art advisor, waving me over to meet a local gallery owner. I glanced back at Caleb, but he was already turning away, his expression unreadable. As I walked toward Professor Lin, my heart raced with a mix of hope and dread. Caleb's presence at the showcase wasn't just a coincidence. It was a challenge, a question, a spark. And I had a feeling that whatever came next would change everything. The weeks that followed the art showcase were a strange dance of avoidance and curiosity. Caleb didn't bring up my sketch again, but his jabs grew softer, more hesitant, like he was testing the waters. I caught him watching me sometimes, when I was sketching late at night or humming to music through my earbuds. His gaze wasn't mocking anymore. It was searching, like he was trying to piece together a puzzle he didn't understand. I, on the other hand, was wrestling with my own contradictions. Part of me wanted to confront Caleb, to lay bare the hurt his words had caused and demand he see me for who I was. But another part, the part that noticed how his laugh lit up the dorm, or how he'd leave me the last slice of pizza without a word, wanted something else entirely. It was dangerous, this pull toward him, and I shoved it down deep, where it couldn't complicate things. Portland's autumn deepened, the campus blanketed in shades of amber and crimson. I threw myself into my art, spending hours in the studio, where the smell of paint and turpentine grounded me. My latest project was a series of portraits, each capturing a moment of vulnerability. One was of my mom, her hands folded in prayer, worry etched into her face from years of shielding me from our town's judgment. Another was of a stranger I'd seen on the bus, their eyes distant with unspoken grief. But the one I couldn't finish was of Caleb, his profile caught in the golden light of our dorm window, his expression unguarded for once. I didn't know why I was drawing him, only that I couldn't stop. One rainy afternoon, I returned to the dorm to find Caleb hunched over my sketchbook, open to that unfinished portrait. My heart stopped. What the hell, Caleb? I snapped, snatching the book from his hands. You don't get to snoop through my stuff? He stood, his face flushed. I wasn't snooping. It was open on your desk, and I just saw it. He paused, his eyes locked on mine. Is that me? I froze, my throat tight. There was no point lying, he'd seen it. Yeah, I said, my voice barely audible. It's you. He looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. Why'd you draw me like that? All serious and stuff. I could have brushed it off, made a joke, but something in his tone, raw, almost vulnerable, stopped me. Because that's how I see you sometimes, I said. When you're not trying to be the loudest guy in the room. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain pattered against the window, a soft rhythm that filled the silence. Then Caleb said, I'm not that guy, you know. The one who just makes jokes and doesn't care. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. Could have fooled me. He winced, and I saw it, the crack in his armor widening. I know I've been a jerk, he said, his voice low. The stuff I said, I didn't mean it like that. I don't know how to talk to you sometimes. My pulse quickened. This was the closest he'd ever come to an apology, and it threw me. Then why say it at all? I asked. Why make me feel like I'm less? Caleb's jaw tightened, and he looked down at his hands. I don't know, man. I guess I'm figuring stuff out too. The words hung between us, heavy with meaning I wasn't ready to unpack. Before I could respond, our sweet mate, Jamal, burst in, dripping wet from the rain, and the moment shattered. But as Caleb turned away, grabbing his jacket to head out, I knew something had shifted. He wasn't just my roommate anymore. He was a question I couldn't stop asking. That night, I went to a campus LGBT Alliance meeting, my first since arriving at Reed. The room was warm, filled with voices and laughter, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't tell them everything. Not about Caleb, not about the ache in my chest, but I shared my name, my pronouns, and a small piece of my story. When I mentioned growing up in Arizona, a girl named Priya, with kind eyes and a nose ring, squeezed my hand. "You're safe here," she said, and I almost believed her. When I got back to the dorm, Caleb was still out, probably at some party. I sat at my desk, staring at his empty bed, and opened my sketchbook. The portrait of him was still there, half-finished, his eyes waiting for me to decide what they held. I picked up my pencil and started to draw, letting the lines speak what I couldn't. The next morning, Caleb was quieter than usual, nursing a coffee as he scrolled through his phone. I was about to head to class when he spoke up. "Eli, you got a sec?" I turned, wary. "Yeah, what's up?" He hesitated, then pulled out a flyer from his bag, a rainbow-colored one for the LGBT Alliance's open mic night. "Saw this on the quad. You going?" My stomach flipped. Was he mocking me again? But his expression was earnest, almost nervous. "Maybe," I said carefully. "Why?" He shrugged, but his eyes didn't leave mine. "Just thought it sounded cool. I might go too." I didn't know what to say. Caleb at an LGBT event? It didn't add up. But before I could press him, he grabbed his backpack and headed out, leaving the flyer on my desk like a challenge. That flyer stayed in my mind all day, a spark of possibility I wasn't sure I trusted. Was Caleb just curious, or was there something more? And why did the thought of him showing up, of seeing me in a space where I was fully myself, make my heart race with both fear and hope? The open mic night was held in a cozy coffee shop just off campus, its walls lined with local art and fairy lights casting a warm glow. I'd signed up to read a poem I'd written, something raw about hiding in plain sight. My hands shook as I clutched the paper, the words blurring under the weight of what they meant. This was my chance to be open, to claim a piece of myself I'd kept locked away. But the thought of Caleb showing up made my stomach churn. Would he laugh? Would he understand? Or would he just sit there, judging me in silence? The room filled quickly, students, professors, even a few locals, their faces a mix of curiosity and support. I scanned the crowd, half expecting to see Caleb's broad shoulders, but he wasn't there. Part of me was relieved. Part of me was disappointed. I didn't have time to dwell on it, though, because Priya was waving me toward the stage, her smile encouraging. I stepped up to the mic, my heart pounding so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. "This is called Unseen," I said, my voice unsteady at first. The poem poured out, each line a piece of my truth. The fear of being judged, the weight of silence, the quiet hope of being enough. When I finished, the room erupted in applause, and Priya pulled me into a hug. "You killed it," she whispered, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I belonged. As I stepped off the stage, I saw him, Caleb, leaning against the back wall, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. My breath caught. He'd come. He'd actually come. I made my way toward him, weaving through the crowd, my pulse racing. "You're here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah," he said, his eyes flicking to the stage. "That was intense. You wrote that?" I nodded, waiting for the punchline, but it didn't come. Instead, he looked at me, really looked at me, like he was seeing me for the first time. "It was good," he said quietly. "Like, really good." I didn't know what to say. This wasn't the Caleb who tossed out careless jabs. This was someone new, someone who'd shown up to a place he didn't belong, just to hear me speak. Before I could respond, the next performer took the stage, and Caleb gestured toward the door. "Want to grab some air?" We stepped outside, the night cool and sharp with the scent of rain-soaked pavement. The street was quiet, the campus lights glowing in the distance. Caleb leaned against the brick wall, his hands in his pockets. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice low. "For all the dumb stuff I said. I didn't get it, how it made you feel." I stared at him, caught off guard. "Why now?" I asked. "What changed?" He hesitated, his jaw tight. "I don't know. I saw your poem, heard what you said up there. It hit me. You're not just some guy I mess with. You're—" He trailed off, searching for the right word. "You're real." My heart stuttered. Real. It was the closest anyone had come to seeing me, all of me, in a long time. But I wasn't ready to let my guard down. "You don't know me, Caleb," I said, my voice sharp. "You don't know what it's like to hide who you are." He flinched, but he didn't look away. "Maybe not. But I'm trying to understand. I want to." I didn't know if I believed him, but the sincerity in his voice cracked something in me. We stood there, the silence stretching between us, until he spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded, wary. "Are you know?" He gestured vaguely, his cheeks flushing. "Gay?" There it was, the question I'd been dodging since we met. I could have lied, could have deflected, but something in his eyes stopped me. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "I am." He didn't flinch, didn't laugh, didn't turn away. He just nodded, like he was processing it. "Okay," he said finally. "Cool. Cool." The word was so simple, so inadequate, but it felt like a bridge between us, fragile but real. We walked back to the dorm in silence, the weight of that moment settling over us. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it was a turning point. The next few days were different. Caleb stopped with the jabs entirely, and in their place was a cautious kind of respect. He'd ask about my art, my classes, even my life back in Arizona. I gave him bits and pieces, testing the waters, but I held back the bigger truth, the one that went beyond being gay, the one that could change everything. Because I wasn't just Eli Navarro, art student. I was Elias Navarro, the kid who'd survived a hate crime at 16, whose story had made local headlines before I'd buried it deep. My attacker, a classmate fueled by small-town prejudice, had left me with a scar on my shoulder and a fear I carried everywhere. I'd never told anyone at Reed, not even Priya. But as Caleb and I grew closer, the secret felt heavier, like a stone I couldn't keep holding. One night, as we sat on the dorm floor eating takeout, Caleb asked about the scar. He'd seen it when I changed shirts, a jagged line across my shoulder blade. "What happened there?" he asked, his tone gentle but curious. I froze, chopsticks halfway to my mouth. "Old injury," I said, hoping he'd drop it. He didn't. "Looks like more than that," he said, his eyes searching mine. "You don't have to tell me, but I'm here." I wanted to tell him. God, I wanted to. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I changed the subject, asking about his latest poli-sci paper, and he let it go. But the question lingered, and so did the spark between us. A spark I wasn't sure I could trust. The spark grew harder to ignore. Caleb started finding excuses to spend time with me, grabbing coffee between classes, tagging along to the art studio, even sitting quietly while I sketched. His presence was a paradox, comforting yet unsettling, familiar yet full of questions. I caught myself watching him too, how his hands moved when he talked, how his laugh softened when it was just us. It was dangerous, this feeling, because I knew better than to hope for more. One Saturday, we ended up at a local flea market, wandering through stalls of vintage records and handmade jewelry. Portland's eclectic vibe was in full swing, the air alive with music and the scent of food trucks. Caleb was in his element, haggling over a leather jacket, his grin infectious. I bought a small pendant for my mom, a turquoise stone that reminded me of home. As we walked, our shoulders brushed, and neither of us pulled away. "You ever miss Arizona?" Caleb asked, tossing a fry from our shared basket into his mouth. "Sometimes," I said. "The desert's got this quiet beauty." but it wasn't always kind. He nodded, like he understood more than I'd said. Idaho's the same. Wide open, but it can feel like it's closing in on you. I glanced at him, surprised. It was the first time he'd hinted at his own struggles, and I wanted to ask more, but a street performer's guitar pulled our attention. We stood there, listening to a soulful rendition of a folk song, and for a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. That night, back in the dorm, Caleb was quieter than usual. I was working on my portrait series, adding details to his sketch, when he spoke up. "Eli, can I ask you something personal?" My heart skipped. "Depends," I said, keeping my tone light. He sat on the edge of his bed, his hands clasped. "When did you know?" "Like, that you were. I set down my pencil, my chest tight. "I was 13, I said. "There was this guy in my art class. He smiled at me once, and it was like everything clicked. But I didn't tell anyone. Not for a long time." Caleb listened, his expression unreadable. "Was it hard? Keeping it to yourself?" I nodded, the memories flooding back. "Yeah, especially where I grew up. People weren't exactly open." He looked down, his fingers tracing the edge of his blanket. "I've never had to hide like that," he said. "But I get feeling like you don't fit." I raised an eyebrow. "You? Mr. All-American?" He laughed, but it was hollow. "You'd be surprised. My daddy's got this whole plan for me. Law school, politics, the works. Doesn't care what I want." "What do you want?" I asked, genuinely curious. He hesitated, then met my eyes. "I don't know yet. But being here, with you, it's making me think." My breath caught. There it was again, that spark, that pull. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck. Instead, I picked up my sketchbook and showed him the portrait. "This is how I see you," I said. "Not the guy your dad wants. Just you." He stared at the drawing, his eyes softening. "You're good at this," he said. "Seeing people." The air between us felt charged, like a storm about to break. I wanted to close the distance, to tell him everything. About the scar, the hate crime, the fear that still woke me up at night. But before I could, he stood, breaking the moment. "I'm gonna grab a shower," he said, his voice rough. "See you in the morning." As he left, I felt the weight of all I hadn't said. I knew I couldn't keep hiding forever. Not from Caleb, not from myself. But the fear was still there, sharp and real, holding me back. The next day, I got a text from Priya inviting me to a queer film screening on campus. I asked Caleb if he wanted to come, half expecting him to say no. To my surprise, he agreed. The film was about two men navigating love in a conservative town, and as we watched, I felt Caleb's arm brush against mine in the dark. He didn't move away, and neither did I. Afterward, we walked back to the dorm, the night air crisp. "That hit hard," Caleb said, his voice low. "The way they had to hide, it's messed up." "Yeah," I said, my heart racing. "It is." He stopped walking, turning to face me. "Eli, I'm sorry. For all the crap I said before. I didn't know what it meant, what you might have gone through." I swallowed, my throat tight. "It's okay," I said, though it wasn't, not entirely. "Just don't assume you know me." He nodded, his eyes steady. "I want to know you, if you'll let me." The words hung between us, a promise and a risk. I didn't know if I was ready, but I knew I wanted to try. The weeks that followed were a blur of tentative steps and unspoken truths. Caleb and I settled into a rhythm, late-night talks, shared meals, moments where the space between us felt charged with possibility. I started opening up, telling him about my mom, my art, the small joys of my childhood. But the scar, the hate crime, the headlines, I kept those locked away, too raw to share. One evening, we ended up at a campus bonfire, the flames casting shadows across the quad. Caleb was quieter than usual, his eyes distant as he stared into the fire. "You ever feel like you're running from something?" he asked, his voice almost lost in the crackle of the flames. I glanced at him, surprised. "Yeah, all the time." He turned to me, his expression open, vulnerable. "What are you running from, Eli?" My heart pounded. This was it, the moment to tell him everything. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I said, "What about you? What's got you so deep in thought?" He hesitated, then sighed. My dad called today. Wants me to intern at his firm this summer. Says it's time to get serious. And you don't want to? I asked. He shook his head. I don't even know if I want to do politics. I want to figure out who I am, you know? Without him breathing down my neck. I nodded, understanding more than he knew. You'll figure it out, I said. You're more than what he wants you to be. He looked at me, his eyes searching. You really believe that? I do, I said, and I meant it. The bonfire burned low, and as the crowd thinned, Caleb and I stayed, the night wrapping around us. I wanted to tell him then, to spill everything, but the fear held me back. Instead, I leaned closer, our shoulders touching, and for a moment, it was enough. The next day, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was tight, worried. Eli, someone from the local paper reached out. They're doing a follow-up story on what happened. They want to talk to you. My stomach dropped. No, I said, my voice sharp. I'm done with that. I know, Mijo, she said softly. But they're digging. They might find you at Reed. I hung up, my hands shaking. The past was catching up, and I wasn't ready. When Caleb walked in, he took one look at my face and frowned. You okay? Yeah, I lied, forcing a smile. Just family stuff. He didn't push, but his concern lingered, a quiet weight between us. I knew I couldn't keep hiding, not if I wanted whatever this was with Caleb to be real. But the thought of him knowing, of anyone knowing, terrified me. A few days later, Priya invited us to a drag show downtown. Caleb hesitated but agreed, and I could tell he was nervous, his usual confidence replaced by something softer. The show was electric, the crowd alive with cheers and laughter. Caleb watched, wide-eyed, as performers owned the stage. During a break, he leaned over, his voice low. This is a lot, but it's cool. I get why you like it. I smiled, my heart swelling. It's freedom, I said. Being who you are, no apologies. He nodded, his eyes lingering on me. I'm starting to get that. As we left the show, walking through Portland's neon-lit streets, Caleb's hand brushed mine. This time, he didn't pull away. My pulse raced, and I let my fingers graze his, a silent question. He didn't answer, not then, but the warmth of his touch stayed with me. Back at the dorm, I couldn't sleep. The call from my mom, the weight of my secret, Caleb's touch, it was all too much. I opened my sketchbook, staring at his portrait, now nearly complete. The eyes were right, finally, open, searching, kind. I didn't know what we were becoming, but I knew I couldn't keep running. The tension between us grew, a tightrope we both walked without naming. Caleb was different now, more open, more present, but I could feel the questions he wasn't asking, the truths I wasn't sharing. Every time his hand brushed mine or his eyes lingered too long, I felt the pull stronger, but the fear was stronger still. What would he think if he knew everything? Would he still look at me the same? One night, we ended up at the art studio, just the two of us. I was working on my portrait series, the deadline looming, and Caleb had insisted on keeping me company. He sat on a stool, flipping through an art magazine, while I mixed paints, the silence comfortable but charged. You ever gonna finish that one of me? He asked, glancing at my canvas. I smirked, trying to keep it light. Maybe. Depends if you stop moving. He laughed, but his eyes were serious. I mean it, Eli. I want to see it. I hesitated, then pulled out the sketchbook, flipping to his portrait. He studied it, his expression softening. Damn, he said. You make me look better than I am. No, I said, my voice quiet. I just draw what I see. He looked at me, and the air shifted, heavy with something unspoken. Eli, he said, his voice low. There's something I need to tell you. My heart stopped. What? He took a deep breath, his hands clenched. I've been thinking a lot. About you, about everything. I don't know what I am, okay? But being around you, it's making me question stuff I never thought about before. I stared at him, my mind racing. Was he saying what I thought he was? Before I could respond, he stood, closing the distance between us. I don't know how to do this, he said, his voice rough. But I know I feel something. For you. The world tilted. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him I felt it too, but the fear surged. The the past, the truth I hadn't shared. Caleb, I said, my voice shaking, there's stuff you don't know about me. Then tell me, he said, his eyes steady. I'm here. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I turned away, my hands trembling as I gripped the edge of the table. I can't, I whispered. Not yet. He didn't push, but I could feel his disappointment, his confusion. When he left the studio, the silence was deafening. I sat there, staring at his portrait, and felt the weight of my secret heavier than ever. The next day, the past caught up. I was in the library when Priya texted me a link to an article, Local Hero's Journey. Where is Elias Navarro now? My blood ran cold. The story detailed the hate crime, my survival, the trial that had torn my town apart. My face was there, a blurry photo from high school, alongside quotes from my mom and the reporter who'd covered it. They'd found me at Reed. I didn't know how to face Caleb, but I didn't have a choice. When I got back to the dorm, he was there, his phone in hand, the article open on his screen. His face was pale, his eyes wide with shock. Eli, he said, his voice breaking, is this you? I nodded, my throat tight. Yeah, that's me. He stood, his hands shaking. Why didn't you tell me? All this time, you went through that, and I was making jokes, acting like an idiot. I looked away, the shame and fear crashing over me. I didn't want you to see me like that, like a victim. You're not a victim, he said fiercely. You're a survivor. And I am so sorry, Eli, for everything. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. I didn't want you to know because I was afraid you'd look at me differently. He stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. I'm looking at you now, and I see you. All of you. The article changed everything. Caleb didn't mock me anymore. He couldn't, not after knowing what I'd been through. But more than that, he didn't pull away. He stayed, closer than ever, his presence a quiet anchor as I navigated the fallout. The campus buzzed with whispers, some supportive, some curious, but Caleb was there, deflecting questions, shutting down rumors, standing by me in a way I hadn't expected. One evening, as winter crept into Portland, we sat on the dorm roof, the city lights sparkling below. I told him everything, the attack, the fear, the way I'd rebuilt myself piece by piece. He listened, his hand resting close to mine, and when I finished, he didn't say anything. He just reached for my hand, his fingers warm and steady. I'm not good at this, he said finally, his voice low, but I want to be here. For you. I looked at him, my heart full. You already are. He smiled, a small, hesitant thing, and then he leaned in, his lips brushing mine. It was soft, tentative, but it felt like a promise to see each other, to keep trying, to build something real. The kiss wasn't the end, it was a beginning. We talked, really talked, about who we were and who we wanted to be. Caleb was still figuring himself out, but he was honest about it, and that was enough. I showed him my finished portrait, the one I'd poured my heart into, and he hung it on his side of the dorm, right next to his football posters. The article faded from the campus's attention, but its impact lingered. I started speaking at LGBT Alliance events, sharing my story, not as a victim, but as someone who'd found strength in survival. Caleb came to every one, his presence a quiet support. And slowly, we built something, friendship, love, trust, something neither of us had expected. One spring day, as we walked across the quad, Caleb stopped, his hand in mine. I was wrong about you, he said, his voice steady. And I'm so damn glad I was. I laughed, squeezing his hand. Me too. We weren't perfect, and neither was the world around us. But in that moment, with the sun warm on our faces and the future wide open, we were enough. And that was everything.